The village of Bagdad, Florida was once the largest producer of yellow pine in the world. And it was also the home of major shipbuilders dating back to the 18th century and a major industrial center during the 19th and 20th centuries. Today, that history is kept alive by the Bagdad Village Preservation Association. As part of the celebration of the 170th anniversary of Bagdad, the association is hosting a lecture series. Here to tell us more about Bagdad, the Bagdad Village Historic Preservation Association, and the lecture series is Bagdad native and upcoming lecture presenter, Dr. J. Richard Lewis. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jeff, for having us.
Well, y'all are always doing great things, and it's a great little village out there. And just tell us a little bit about Bagdad and specifically the Bagdad Village Preservation Association.
Well, the association was formed about 30 years ago, and its purpose is to, obviously, to record the history of Bagdad, to help with the preservation of historic buildings, and to tell that story. We operate the Bagdad Museum, and there's the site of a great deal of learning about Baghdad. Everyone's welcome to come. It's free.
Well, we mentioned just a couple of things in our lead in there, but what are some other things about Bagdad that people may not know?
Well, perhaps they don't realize how important Bagdad was as an industrial site. In fact, it was one of the engines for industrial development in the whole state of Florida. Vast fortunes were made out of the lumber industry there, and of course shipbuilding. And those funds were used to start up building industrial efforts all over the state. So its history is really, really important to the state of Florida.
Tell us a little bit about what's in the museum. Are there things that kind of tell this story that you're mentioning?
Well, the hub of Baghdad, of course, was the Baghdad Mill, largest producer of yellow pine in the world at one time. And so we tell the story of the museum. We also tell the story of the shipbuilding in Baghdad, which astonishingly goes back a long, long way. And of course we tell something about the community life in Baghdad, something about the churches, the schools, all of the folks who've been engaged in the wars of America. We try to tell as much of the story of Baghdad as we possibly can. It's a treat to visit.
Well, I've been to the museum. Now, it was actually an historic building as well and was moved from one site to another one. Is that correct?
In fact, it very well may be the oldest black church still in use in the state of Florida. It was constructed immediately after the Civil War, wasn't finished until almost 1900, and served as a black church until about I'm going to estimate 40 or 50. And then the folks built another church, and they donated it to the Bagdad Village Preservation Association. We moved it and renovated it and used it as the museum.
Well, that ties right into our conversation about the lecture series, because it is held at the museum. Is that correct?
It is, and we'll have a series, one a month, typically on the first Saturday of the month at 10 o'clock at the museum. Our July one will be altered a little bit because of the July 4th holiday. I think we've moved it to the 10th of July. But otherwise, it'll be the first Saturday, and everyone's welcome, and again, it's free.
Hey, free is always great, and it is a great time to learn. Well, I know you're going to be presenting here real soon. Tell us a little bit about the topic, and then discuss a little bit about what you'll be sharing with people.
The history of segregation in Baghdad is very much like the history of segregation in the rest of the nation. But Baghdad had a little softer landing than some places did, because Baghdad was an industrial site. Black folks were workers earning a salary, so there was a certain congenial relationship among people in Baghdad. So when desegregation took place in America, Baghdad had a bit of an easier time. I don't mean to suggest that it was problem-free, but it was easier than lots of places. And as a result, some good things have happened in Baghdad, but there's still a great deal to be done in that whole area.
Mm-hmm. Now, you're going to, I guess some of your topic and your talk will be based on your book here that we have here with us today. Tell us a little bit about your work that went into writing this book.
Well, first of all, some of the reading was very painful. The history of segregation in America is not a happy one, as you can well imagine. Tragically, after the Civil War, things took off for a bad start immediately after the war, but actually with the establishment of the Reconstruction Plan by the radical Republicans in Congress, things actually went pretty well, and there was actually a good chance that people would make an accommodation for living together, black and white. There were three major groups, the conservatives, the liberals, and the populists, all of whom were interested in including blacks into society in one degree or another. Through a series of missteps, all of them fell out of power. And what one could really call the lowest element in Southern society, some people have called them the crackers, took over control. And actually the harshest methods were applied to black people, and the Jim Crow laws were put into effect. Social practices and legal practices caused people to be segregated and pushed down in a pretty dramatic fashion. Mm-hmm. And the tragedy is that could have been so different, because things were making progress until what I'll call that lowest element in Southern society gained control.
Well, how did the Jim Crow laws affect Baghdad in the country?
Baghdad was like most other places. There was a separate housing area for Baghdad called the quarters, and black people were restricted to that. Schools were like schools all over the South for black people, grossly inadequate. Textbooks were, if they were there at all, were cast off from other schools. Black teachers were paid less than white teachers. Astonishingly enough, because there were so many opportunities for professional life closed to black people, some of the best minds among the black community went into teaching, so some of the teachers were simply extraordinary and overcame many of the disadvantages.
Well, as a native of Baghdad, I know you moved away and have moved back.
Sure.
What do you see today?
Baghdad is a far more congenial place. I'd say that black people and white people have more tolerance for people, each other, than you'll find in most communities. But that's not to paint over problems. There do still exist problems.
Mm-hmm. Now tell us about some other things that the association is involved in as far as promoting goodwill and just fun activities in history.
Well, we do Market Day. I think you've said that you attended Market Day on one occasion, and that's a big affair with lots of vendors of one kind or another, and then homemade ice cream. That's the treat for everybody, and then a big fish fry. That's an event that we hold annually. Then at Christmas time, we have the tour of homes in Baghdad and the Civil War reenactment. We did our first Civil War reenactment last year, and it was I take that back, our second Civil War reenactment, and it was a big hit. So we're counting on a big one this year.
Well, great. Well, just thank you for all you do. We're very happy as the Council on Aging to have a congregate meal site now in the community center.
That's right.
So we're involved, and actually some of our staff are moving out there real soon. So it's just a pleasure to be able to watch what's happening in Baghdad. Thank you for being here.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.